Tonight we're at Brunel University in Uxbridge, and this is Question Time. Welcome to you at home, to our audience here, and to our panel, the Conservative Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, the Shadow Education Secretary, Tristram Hunt, possibly another Labour leadership candidate, the recently re-elected leader of UKIP, Nigel Farage, the first woman editor of The Economist, Zanny Minton Beddoes, and the political campaigner and lead guitarist of Queen, Brian May. And a reminder, if you want to text or tweet our hashtag BBCQT, you can follow us at BBC Question Time. If you're texting comments, go to 83981. The red button will tell you what others are saying. Right, our first question tonight from Ray Green, please. Ray Green.
Is there a place in today's politics for snarling, thin-skinned and aggressive leaders?
Is there a place in today's politics for snarling, thin-skinned and aggressive leaders? The words used by the UKIP campaign manager, Patrick O'Flynn, about our guest here tonight, Nigel Farage. But I won't start with you, Nigel. Tristram Hunt.
Oh, that's disappointing.
We're seeing some pretty ruckus times with UKIP at the moment, and Nigel will answer for those. From a Labour perspective, we have our own challenges because despite what we're seeing with UKIP, we lost an awful lot of votes in historically Labour communities.
What are you talking about? The question isn't about that. The question's about snarling, thin-skinned, aggressive leaders, unless you pretend to be one of those.
No, but I was trying to sort of expand it beyond
well, don't.
snarling.
Answer the question. We may come to the Labour Party later.
Okay, fine. I think that historically there are leaders with all sorts of attributes. I think clearly there is space for snarling leaders within modern politics, just not in the Labour Party.
OK. All right, Nigel Farage.
Well, no, of course there isn't. I mean, snarling, aggressive, angry leaders wouldn't get very far, would they? And I suppose generally my reputation... I don't think I've ever been photographed without a pint of beer, and generally quite a big smile. And I was disappointed that a member of our team said this. But look, general elections, you're under a huge amount of pressure, and particularly it's like a boiler room, a pressure cooker. I'm sure the others would agree. And we maintain discipline as a party extraordinarily well during this general election compared to the past. The election's over, people are letting off steam, and we've seen one or two people fighting personal wars against each other. But what I would say is this. I think what people are looking for in politics are leaders that are assertive, leaders that are not afraid to tell the truth, even if they know it may not always be popular, leaders that have actually had a job in the real world and got some experience of life, and leaders that are in politics out of conviction and not just for a career. And whatever my faults are, and perhaps they're many, I'm in politics because I believe in what I say and I want this country to change.
OK. You said you'd resign if you didn't win.
I did.
South Thanet. You did resign, then 2 days later, you came back again as leader. Are you now leader, and are you confident that you will remain leader?
I did resign. I did resign, is the first point to make. And I was, as I said, if I didn't win, I'd resign, and I had to offer that resignation formally to our elected national executive of the party, who just point blank refused to accept it and showed me signatures, online signatures of thousands of members saying I simply shouldn't go and mustn't go. And so I went and sat in a darkened room and thought, what do I do? I would say smoke-filled room, but that's against the law these days, isn't it? And I thought, actually, what amazed me was for the national executive of any political party to be unanimous is in itself pretty remarkable. And I felt, quite frankly, moved by the strength of their appeal. And I said, on the basis of that, I will continue. And particularly as the one thing that I've striven for in 20 years in politics, from a tiny party to what's now quite a big party, I've always pushed for this country to have a referendum on our membership of the European Union, and now would have been, in retrospect, the wrong time to go.
Would you consider clearing the air by standing in a leadership election, say in the autumn before your conference, and allowing others, because clearly there are people who think you shouldn't any longer be leader, we've heard their voices.
Well,
there.
actually...
Would you consider standing in a leadership election just to clear the air?
Actually, I mean, if you look at today, if you look at the leader of our group in the House of Lords, the leader of our MEPs, if you look at, you know, the people like Richard Desmond and Paul Sykes and Alan Bown and Aaron Banks, the people that have bankrolled the party.
And Stuart Wheeler.
One person who hasn't, but every other one, every single donor who's given us more than Stuart Wheeler has come out tonight in public support. UKIP Wales, UKIP Scotland, UKIP Northern Ireland. The level of support for me in the party is phenomenal. And frankly, to go through a leadership contest at a time when Mr Cameron says he's renegotiating our relationship with the European Union would be a massive, massive mistake.
Okay. The man here in the front, you sir.
Like most politicians, you've said something and gone back on what you said. Now, surely that you're in the Nick Clegg group now.
No.
People just will not believe you. They'll think of you as clown shoes. That's all they will think.
Well,
they will not think of you as a proper politician anymore.
I did
because
resign.
you said one thing and you've done something else.
I did say I'd resign, but actually, what our national executive said was that for UKIP to have got 4 million votes in this general election, to establish ourselves as the third biggest party in British politics, and from all the analysis, to have fought the least negative campaign in terms of what we said about the other parties. Actually, this wasn't a failure. This was a massive, massive step forward for the party.
But that's not what you said, is it?
And I did go into that room with my resignation letter, determined that I was going to walk out of there a free man, and they dragged me back over the wall.
The people of England would think of you a lot better if you'd stood by your word and went back for another re-election.
But
you didn't. You've gone back and you weren't.
As I say, the one big change is that we have, by fluke almost, and partly because of the SNP, but we have a majority Conservative government. And now Mr Cameron has to deliver something in that referendum promise that he only made because of the rise of the support of UKIP. My guess is he's going to call that referendum early. My guess is that referendum will be in May next year, and for UKIP to spend 3 months on a leadership campaign would have been a huge mistake.
Right, I'll come to other members of the audience in a moment. Sorry, Jeremy Hunt.
Well, I'm not that surprised to hear any politician described as thin-skinned, because actually, and this might come as a huge surprise to the British people, but all politicians are actually human underneath. We're pretty good at disguising it sometimes, I know, Nigel, but I think actually everyone has that human side.
Aggressive and snarling.
Snarling, I think, is perhaps something that's a subset of politicians, let's put it that way. But I think the...
You recognise it as a description of the leader of UKIP?
He's always been a total charmer when I've seen him, and I didn't think I was going to come onto this show and stick up for Nigel Farage, but there you are. That's my job in the cabinet, go on. But what I would say is that I think that those personal attacks always backfire. And actually, they are the worst thing in British politics. They actually remind people what they dislike most about politicians. And I think normally when they happen, they reflect far worse on the person who made the attack than the person who's actually being attacked. And I think that there's a post-election period. It's a time of challenge for parties that didn't win. But people should remember that point.
All right. The woman in the third row.
If we could just go back, sorry, to the letter not being accepted. I don't quite understand the concept. As a teacher, if I gave a resignation letter to my head teacher, he couldn't not accept it.
Well, you know, I have to act by an elected national executive who were there as the representatives of 47,000 members of our party, and they were unanimous in their view. But it wasn't just that; it was them bringing in letters of support and showing that look, the Labour Party, and Lib Dems have got to go through leadership contests. Yeah. They said, Nigel, you would be putting this party through unnecessary grief. You've done a great job. You've fought a great campaign. A referendum's on the agenda. Get on with it.
Okay, Zanny, Minton,
can I just ask you? Whether or not you're going back on your word, the question I have is whether this is a short-term view of your taking of what your party should be doing, because essentially you're not allowing your party to have a debate about where its leadership should go, and it's going to be more and more still a one-man band of a party.
Well, actually, we had a leadership contest a few months ago, and it was uncontested. Nobody put their name up against me.
Yeah, but you said something.
So in fact, you know, I had several more years to go. I had intended to resign. I was convinced that would be a mistake. And this European referendum, it's on the agenda, it's being debated. I'll be in Strasbourg next week doing battle with the European Commission.
But won't you be in a stronger position if you don't have people saying that you're going back on your word?
If I'm right, and this referendum, and I can't see Cameron wanting to see the whole 5 years of his government dominated by this. We've got English, Welsh and Scottish elections in May next year. That's when the referendum's going to be. We can't afford as a party that wants Britain to be free to waste 3 or 4 months of our time having a leadership contest where, frankly, we know the result already.
We know the result already because it's a one-man band.
Because at the moment, far from a one-man band, but at the moment, I have an astonishing level of support within the party.
Brian May.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with you changing your mind about resigning. You know, I think that happens a lot. People resign, you know, and it's the gentlemanly thing to do in a sense. And if people don't want to reject that, who believe in you, I think that's very valid. Yeah, I didn't think I would be supporting Nigel Farage in this programme either, but I support that. You know, what I don't like, you know, in common with Jeremy here, is this kind of insults approach in politics, and I think that's what we need to get rid of. And I think it's a real shame that people in your party have adopted that attitude. You know, snarling, aggressive, whatever. You know, let's look at the positive side. You know, this kind of negative campaigning is really damaging British politics, I believe, and that's part of the reason that people really don't believe in politicians anymore. So I'm with you, really.
That's probably okay. I get the woman at the back there. Yes.
I'm just wondering what will be the point of UKIP now that we are going to have a referendum.
Sorry, I wanted to go to the woman behind you, actually, if I can.
But it's a very good question, and they asked the same thing about the SNP, who lost a referendum, and then look what happened to them. So you never know in politics.
Okay, over here, over there, look, on the...
Back to Nigel Farage's point about your support within the party, I don't think it matters whether or not you have support within the party. The people of South Thanet don't support you anymore. You're no longer MP, and I don't think that means you should be the leader of the party anymore, personally.
Can I just correct you? I've never been an MP, I've been an MEP, and it is a quite extraordinary thing that we now have an electoral system in Britain where UKIP get more votes than the Liberal Democrats and the SNP combined. In fact, Chuck implied, and we're about the same as half the panel I stood on the leaders' debates with, and we've only got one member of Parliament. And at no point in the democratic history of this country have so many electors been represented by so few representatives.
Yeah.
And we do need genuine electoral reform in this country.
Nigel Farage, we may come to that. The only point I'd like to make, just in addition, we've made a number of points, is that it was you who said it's frankly just not credible for me to continue to lead the party without a Westminster seat. So
yes,
and people there say you've got to be credible.
And I would never have believed, David, that we could get 4 million votes, that we could be the third biggest party by country.
But your words were without a Westminster seat. How you had to be the first to come, and you ain't.
And again, I said to the gentleman there how politics has changed. Who would have thought Nicola Sturgeon would emerge such a winner, not even standing for the British Parliament? So, you know, the political scenery
she never said she'd have to stand down. She didn't run for a seat.
Politics is changing, and I hope it changes a lot more too.
Tristram Hunt, you only spoke briefly at the beginning. A quick word, and then we'll move on.
I think what Nigel has said about how, if you look at the post-war election, the traditional Labour-Tory camps and us slugging it out, between us we used to get 95% of the vote. Politics has become more divided. Politics has become more dynamic. I do think we're going to have to look at the electoral system again. The entirety of the Parliament, this is what... It's depressing that we lost, but what is exciting about this Parliament is that the future of the United Kingdom is going to have to be discussed, our federal future potentially. The future, I think, of our politics are going to have to be discussed. That the energy that we saw both in terms of the Scottish referendum, part of it in the general election, now we have to continue into the next 5 years, because I think there's an awful lot up to grabs in terms of the future of politics in the UK and the future of the UK itself.
OK. Man with spectacles there, just briefly, if you would. No, in the centre. Yeah.
To borrow a term, Nigel, are you not becoming a specialist in failure? You failed to get any more UKIP MPs. You failed to win your constituency. Are you not now not running in the leadership contest because you believe that you will fail at that as well?
Well, could I just say...
Very briefly,
could I just say that I may not have won the seat in South Thanet, but we've taken Thanet District Council. We have a working majority of 10. It is the first UKIP-controlled authority in this country, and watch how they get on.
OK. That counts for nothing when you're not in...
No, it does count for something. It's our first controlled council.
We've
won 4 million votes.
We've got lots more topics to go to, including possibly that one. Just to say, next week we're going to be in Derby, and the week after that we're in Aberdeen. So if you want to come to Question Time, the details are on the screen now. But I want to go on to another question. This is involving another party. Mark Everett.
Who is the best person To make Labour electable again.
Right. I'm not going to come to you, Tristram Hunt, first. We'll go to Nigel Farage. Who do you think is the best person?
I think one of the remarkable things...
Let's talk about Labour's...
I think one of the remarkable things about this general election, and the story that has not yet been fully told, is that the metropolitan elite and media have misunderstood what UKIP's about over the course of the last 2 or 3 years. As we've grown, there was always the impression that all UKIP voters were former Conservatives and angry and elderly, and perhaps in the early days we had a few of those. But actually in this election what we saw were many of our older voters actually leave us for this election and vote Conservative because of their fear of the SNP. And the reason we got 4 million votes is we supplemented that with younger voters. A lot of people...
Sorry, the question's about
hang on. A lot of people... a long route round. A lot of people who'd never voted before, and we cost the Labour Party 20 to 30 seats because they had a leader that does not connect in the Midlands and the North, and a Labour Party that doesn't connect with working class communities in this country. And if Labour make the mistake of choosing somebody else again from the metropolitan elite, they will have got it wrong. I thought actually Dan Jarvis, who's the guy that's ruled himself out, might have been the kind of Labour MP that would connect. From the list of runners and riders I've seen so far, none of them will connect, and I think Labour faces a massive, massive crisis for its soul.
Okay. Zanny.
I think the simple answer is that the person who brings Labour back to the centre, because Ed Miliband decided that the country had moved to the left. The country said, no, we haven't moved to the left. And Labour will become electable again once it moves back to the centre. It's a Blairite, if you will, and there's any number of people who could be that. But I think it's a much harder task than it was before, in part because, as you say, UKIP has made inroads in the north of England, the SNP has decimated the party in Scotland, and the Tories have progressed in the south of England against Labour. So I think it's a much, much harder task, and it won't be one unless Labour comes to the centre, so it has to be someone who does that.
OK. Tristram Hunt, will you put your name forward as somebody who moved the party to the centre and could win for Labour?
You know, I'm interested in the leadership. I'm talking to other MPs. I'm going to be talking to my constituency Labour Party in Stoke-on-Trent tomorrow. And I think your analysis is correct, which is that we face a triple bind. We face Scottish nationalism north of the border and the move of voting from social class to national identity, which found a voice in the SNP. We face a problem with historically Labour communities who are feeling left behind by the impact of globalisation, who aren't feeling as if they're succeeding in the modern world and the Labour Party wasn't talking to them. And then we face a challenge in communities like we are this evening in Uxbridge, who are more prosperous but did not feel that the Labour Party spoke to them in terms of aspiration, that they did not trust us with their family finances, with the public finances. And we can't deliver each of those areas with narrow policy prescriptions. It has to be a broader message about the future of Britain, which everyone can buy into. And from a Labour perspective, that's a progressive, internationalist, social democratic future,
and are you
which says that people can trust you with it.
Are you the person to run for the leadership to deliver that message?
That's what I've got to decide over the coming
days.
Hurry
up, because you realise... no, I tell you why.
I'll tell you why.
I'll tell you why. We've been doing the figures. There are 5 candidates already. Yep. They each need 35 Labour MPs. You haven't got that many more Labour MPs left around. To sign your nomination papers. So you better decide here and now.
Well, David,
too late.
David, nominations only open on the 9th of June. So there's an entire month before actually any decisions need to be made. And also, we've got 5 years ahead of us in terms of this government at the moment. We have taken an absolute hammering. You know, we are 100 seats behind the Tories. And again, the issue is this, that lots of people voted Tory at this general election, and we need them once again to vote Labour. People voted SNP, they need to vote Labour, and people voted UKIP, and they need to vote Labour. And we have to have an inclusive message about the future of Britain,
stump speech,
which gets them.
With the question
I'm setting out the analysis and the future.
You're setting out your stump speech, because the question was, who's the best person?
Well, we're going to find that out. That's up to the Labour Party. But I would also say...
I take it that you're running from what you've said.
I would also say it has to be a conversation with the country and not just the conference. We have
you're
to
not
use
ruling
this
yourself out from running.
I'm not ruling myself in or out. I'm talking to other MPs, and I'm going to talk to my Labour Party in Stoke-on-Trent.
In the morning?
No, we have meetings in the evening.
Oh, all right, well, in the evening. Brian May.
I find myself angered by the word aspiration. I think it's an enormous red herring. Aspiration ought to mean aspiring to do great things. You know, some people aspire to do great paintings, make music or whatever. Some people aspire to actually help people, and aspiration has become all about money, and I find that very off-putting, and I'm sad to see the Labour Party using that language as well as Cameron. My opinion, I'm not going to put my name behind any particular candidate for the new Labour leadership, but I personally would like to see the Labour Party become what it used to be in the old days of an Aaron Bevan and whatever. I would like to see it become the party of the working man again. And to me, that's disagreeing with you completely, you know, but I think that the working people of this country feel betrayed. And I was actually shocked that Cameron could get away, you know, in the midst of this enormous spin which was behind him, to say that the Conservative Party is the party of the working man, whereas in fact it's the party of the rich man, you know, and probably the undeserved rich.
I have to say, I wish Tristram well in your campaign. If you want to talk about internationalism to working class Labour voters, they want to talk about depressed wages, the fact their kids can't get houses, they can't get school places. They're the conversations that working class communities want, and I don't see a single Labour leadership contender, even possibly including yourself, that is even connecting or understanding with what these people
I think you should start with food banks. Why are there food banks?
Yeah, because of the unequal nature of growth we've seen in recent years, and this is the other point.
And the growth inequality.
I don't think we should throw away what the Labour Party's achieved over the last 5 years in terms of raising the issue of inequality, raising the issue of food banks. Actually, Ed Miliband did a great service in putting that at the top of the political agenda, and whoever wins the Labour leadership shouldn't jettison that.
Right, Jeremy Hunt.
Well, I'm a Conservative Cabinet Minister, so I think I'm the last person that Tristram is actually going to listen to for any advice, but I would just gently say I think you need to find a better slogan than progressive, internationalist, social democratic future, because I think that does sound quite Westminster Village. But I think the election in the end was about the economy, and I actually agree with Zanny that for the last 25 years, the party that has persuaded the British public that it is on the centre ground of British politics has been the party that's won the election. And David Cameron did do that. I do think the Conservative Party is on the centre ground of British politics. But I think it would probably be in our electoral interests for Labour to elect another left-wing leader. But I hope they don't, because I don't want to go back to the politics of envy. I actually don't agree with you, Brian. I think aspiration is incredibly important as a motor. I think you need wealth creators. I'm in charge of the NHS. I need more doctors and nurses in the NHS. I need the economy to be doing well for that. And I think when you set one part of society against another and go back to that old sort of class-based politics that we used to have, it's a step backwards. And I hope the Labour Party doesn't go there.
All right. I just hear from one or two members of the room. Down up there, the second row from the back.
I just want to get back to the point on housing, which is acting as a real stifler for social mobility. Will all of the political parties, and Zanny's there from The Economist also, just comment on the fact that the housing crisis is caused by the inability to build on the green belt, which is essentially because of the inability to confront...
But you think that any party that said they'd build on the green belt would win votes?
No, but I think it would improve the housing shortage.
No, we don't
and
need
that would
to do
improve
that.
social mobility and the aspiration.
Zanny, you take this up.
I think you're completely right. It's not the only cause, but the housing problem in this country is in large part a problem of supply. We're just building too few houses, and we need to build more houses. And those houses can be in brownfield sites, and some of them could and should be on the green belt.
All right, let's not get distracted by housing.
You're the
It wasn't
expert
the question.
economist. Surely, what nobody dares
briefly,
talk about here is demand. And demand is a rapidly
People
rising...
are talking about demand the whole time.
But a rapidly rising population has put massive pressure on housing in this country.
So you build more houses.
And not to admit that, and I found this in the leaders' debates, they simply wouldn't admit it. We have got hundreds of thousands of empty properties in this country, some owned by government, and lots of brownfield sites that we could build on, and we could provide those houses.
Thank you for making the point. It's not one of the questions we had, and I appreciate you making it, but I don't want to get distracted by that, because I've got a whole lot... I know it's important. I've got a whole lot of other questions that we have chosen. The woman up there on the gangway. Who?
Me.
You. All right, you then.
It sounds as if you didn't want to really talk about it, but just touching on the point of the green belt, the whole point of aspiration is that you want to live near the countryside and the city. If you get rid of the green belt, then you lose most of what people want to live in the suburbs for.
Well, one of the things on housing, we do need to build more housing. I prefer a brownfield-first strategy. I want to see regeneration in our urban areas, but we have to sort out housing benefit. One of the craziest elements of the modern welfare state is how much we expend on housing benefit, which is basically a public subsidy for landlords to rent out multiple properties, often not very good situations.
Okay.
So getting a grip of the housing benefit bill is a really significant
All right,
component,
let's leave housing for the moment. Paul Faithful, please. I'm going to move on to the questions that were submitted by our audience. Paul Faithful. Can't fight the whole hustings here.
What concessions should the Prime Minister try and get for Britain from other EU member countries prior to the referendum?
What concessions? The Prime Minister is going to... Europe is going to try and get concessions before the referendum. What concessions should he get? Zanny, Minton, Beddoes, what do you think?
You know, I would actually not use the word concession, because I think the point of this should not only be to get enough to get the referendum passed in Britain, but actually to use the opportunity to turn the European Union into something better. And so what I think this needs to be focused on is how do you improve the EU so that Britain, and I firmly believe that Britain is better off within it, and I'm sure you will disagree, how you... Yeah, I know you will.
I will, honestly.
I know you will, very, very vociferously. And I would say a few things. Firstly, I think on freedom of movement of labour, I think that's sacrosanct, but that doesn't mean benefits for everybody, and I think we can do something there, and the Germans would go along with that. Secondly, we need to make this more of a single market. That was what Britain was pushing in the 1980s. We have further to go. Create a single market in services, make the EU more of a vibrant single market. Thirdly, get rid of red tape. The Germans want to do that as much as everybody else. Small business across the continent is throttled by that. And fourthly, the difficult one is renegotiate or figure out the relationship between countries inside the euro and countries that are not inside the euro, and make sure that the majority in the euro can't bull those things through.
Do you want us to stay in the EU?
Absolutely, I do.
So if all those things you've described are not one, would you
It's not
still
a
vote
question
to
of
stay
winning.
in? Well,
yes, I would vote.
concessions, you call them.
No, I started off by saying they shouldn't be called concessions.
Well, whatever they're called, they're changes.
I think this is working. Yes, changes to the EU.
If you can't get the changes, would you still say it's worth staying in?
Yes, I do think it's worth staying in, but I think you can get those changes and you can change the EU for the better. The UK benefits enormously from being in the European Union. We're an open trading nation. As part of the biggest free trade area in the world, we do incredibly well.
Jeremy Hunt, are there circumstances in which you would vote no to staying in the EU?
Well, I think I want to see what the deal is, but I do have a lot of confidence about the Prime Minister being able to get a good deal. But to answer the question that Paul asked directly, I think there are some good things about the EU, access to the biggest single market in the world, the investment and jobs it creates. And there are some bad things, and I think the worst thing about the EU is the abuse of freedom of movement. It's not the freedom of movement itself, it's the abuse of it, and that is people who come here and don't get a job but claim benefits, or people who come here... or people who come here and do get a job, but it gets topped up because we have in-work benefits, tax credits, and I think we do need to... we need a lot of immigrants. The NHS, 20% of our doctors are immigrants. We would fall over without the brilliant work that those doctors do. But we can't have a system where we're subsidising people to come here on low-paid jobs because that pushes down wages for everyone else. So I think the biggest single thing we need to do is to get back control of our welfare system. That's what David Cameron wants to do, and that's what I think the Germans are willing to talk to us about. And that is something I think would make a massive difference.
The man in the blue there. The man in blue there, thank you.
As David Cameron's already been discussed with the European Union, a lot of the policies he wants to discuss are actually not up for discussion. So I don't know where we're actually going to go with this.
Yes, the German government saying they want treaty change one day, but it won't happen tomorrow.
Well, I think they are willing to talk on this, and they've given some very strong signals because it's a problem for Germany as well. And I think, you know, the thing about freedom of movement, the people who set up the EU, for them it was the most exciting thing, and we do benefit from it. In our holidays, we're able to go there. Brits go and retire in Spain. You know, there's business benefits. We benefit from it, but not from the abuse of it. And I think that's the thing that if we could get right, would make people a lot happier with that relationship.
We won't get the right because it's not.
Am I allowed to ask a question? I would like to know if you think David Cameron wants us to come out of Europe or not. I would love to know.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer it. Well, I think Nigel wants to answer it, but as you asked me, Grant, no, I don't.
Put on your innocent face. You must answer the question.
Yes, not a snarling face or whatever it was that we were talking about earlier. Look, I don't think David Cameron does want to leave the EU, but he wants to know that he can get the right deal before he recommends to the British people that we stay in. And that's why he's done something that no Prime Minister has done before, which is said, I actually want to renegotiate this relationship.
What Harold Wilson
it's
said
not,
in 1975.
No, he wanted a referendum to confirm that people wanted to stay in.
He renegotiated before it.
OK, but David Cameron is saying, you know, all these years later, when most of us haven't had a chance to vote about whether we want to stay in or not, it's time to change. The EU has changed dramatically.
You don't think there's another... You don't think he's just trying to appease the people in the right of his party so he can be seen to have tried? I mean...
No, I think he wants to change... I think he wants to change the relationship. Look, it's a very big deal to say to the British people... I'll just say, it's a very big deal to say, I want to renegotiate this relationship. Other European countries don't particularly want to go through this process. And to go into an election saying... This is what I'm going to do.
Why is he so keen to offer a referendum on that issue and not, for instance, on fox hunting?
I think the reason is because there are some issues that are of big constitutional significance that it really is appropriate to ask the people, like the people of Scotland having their decision about whether they wanted to remain part of the UK. I think this is of a constitutional question and it's of a different order, and that's why I think it is different.
All right, the man up there, and then come to Nigel Farage. Sorry, Brian. Yes.
There's a lot of anti-EU rhetoric. There's a lot of positives that come out of the EU. Should we not be looking at the defeatist attitude of we should come straight out, as Nigel Farage and UKIP want, and instead focus on what concessions, or whatever other words you want to put it, we want to see out of the EU to strengthen that relationship and see more of a British impact on it?
All right, Nigel Farage. Should answer that point.
I mean, the one thing for certain is we will not change the European Union itself. They're not interested. They want a European army. They're pushing ahead towards establishing effectively a United States of Europe. The question, what concessions is David Cameron going to get, or could he get, that might change our minds? There will be no treaty change. You know, Germany and the European Commission would rather Britain left than gave Britain a treaty change, because as soon as we got a treaty change, the whole of Scandinavia would want it. France would want it. You know, you would begin to unpick the whole structure. If Cameron was able to get treaty change, and we did not have to have free movement of people, we were able to control our borders, if he was able to get back the supremacy of law, such that our Parliament and our Supreme Court would be the ultimate arbiters of British law, not courts in Luxembourg or in Strasbourg, if he came back with that, he'd win the referendum comfortably. But those concessions are not on the table. And what we should be saying is this. What is it we want from our relationship with the European Union? And far from being negative, I want a positive relationship with Europe. I want one based on free trade, which my parents' generation were conned into voting for after a supposed renegotiation. I want friendship, reciprocity. Let's be good next-door neighbours, but let's govern ourselves and let's start thinking a bit more about the rest of the world and not be so obsessed with the markets in Europe.
Okay. Woman at the very back there.
I think it's absolutely fascinating how the sort of mood music seems to have changed coming out of Europe since last Thursday's results. Prior to then, it always seemed to be, no, nothing can be done, nothing can be changed. And in 1 week, suddenly the reaction that we seem to be getting from leaders past and present seems to be remarkably different. Now they've actually got to face this and think, hang on, we really don't want this country to leave. What can we do to sort this out?
And you think that that will happen? And
it makes me quietly optimistic, yes, and personally, from my viewpoint, hopeful.
And you would vote if those things that David Cameron says he wants to achieve were achieved, you would vote yes?
I would, just like Nigel's parents, because I voted last time too.
Right. Tristram Hunt.
Well, the Labour Party opposed the idea of a referendum.
Was that a mistake, by the way?
Because we think it would have introduced instability into the market. And today, Mark Carney, the Governor of Bank of England, said actually he also fears that a period of instability will actually hurt business confidence. But the people of Britain have spoken. Part of the manifesto of the Conservative Party was the referendum. And now what the Labour Party is going to do is make the positive case for Europe. And Jeremy and Nigel were dismissive of the Labour Party or me having an internationalist view. Actually, I think Europe is a positive force for good. But we do need reform, and I agree with Zanny's list. I think we need to deepen the single market, particularly in digital and services, so we get more jobs there and there's more prosperity for Britain out of that market in areas where we're good. We need to reform welfare to make sure that the contributory principle, the basis of our beverage-based welfare state, is also supported.
If none of that was achieved, would you vote out?
Well, we have a great...
You yourself?
We have
or would you vote in whatever
Well,
happens?
I have huge doubts about David Cameron's capacity to deliver any of this. We
No,
saw...
Sorry, you're not answering my question. It's very simple. Are you instinctively a yes, we'll stay in Europe?
I'm instinctively yes, and I'm pro-reform. And the problem is...
Everybody.
The problem is...
We're not pro-reform.
We will not... I'm very doubtful David Cameron has the capacity to deliver any of this. I think the lady at the back is full of hope about what the other leaders of Europe will do. And I'll tell you exactly what will happen is they'll draw up a nice list for him saying, we'll work with you on this on the future and we'll see what we can do. And he'll come back and try to sell it to us. But the real British influence in Europe has been undermined by this government over the last few years. And we saw that with Ukraine. We saw that with what's going on in Greece. British power in Europe has waned under this government, just as it's waned right across the world. And for Nigel to say we need to be internationalists and think beyond Europe,
yes.
The way you get into China and India and America is through Europe.
No, it is not.
It is a big trading bloc. And to turn our back on that is the little England rhetoric which will bring us towards poverty in the long run. So Europe is our way into and through the world, and we need to reform Europe.
I'm sorry, we cannot have this. Now, when this referendum comes...
We can have this.
When this referendum comes, the entire political class will tell you that we're better off inside the EU because it gives us more clout on the world stage. Actually, nothing could be further from the truth. As the world's 6th largest trading nation, we are forbidden from making our own trade deals with any other part of the world. Little countries like Switzerland have got more free trade agreements globally than we've got as EU members. And Iceland, with 250,000 people, has managed to sign its own trade deal with China. We could do a damn sight better job having a trade relationship with the EU, and let's start embracing the Commonwealth and the emerging markets of the world.
All right, thank you. Brian Mayer. And then I've got one or two other members of the audience I'll come to, and then we move on.
What bothers me most about the referendum thing is that we have to vote in a referendum on the basis of what we can hear from the media, and what we hear from the media we can't trust. I observed that this election, the proportion of votes cast was exactly in proportional to the money spent on the campaigns, and I think democracy stops right there. How can that be? How can it be that the party that has the most money always wins? How can that be allowed? And we will be saturated, come this referendum, we will be saturated with page after page, front page in the Telegraph, whatever, propagating the Tory viewpoint, and eventually we will believe it, or at least most of us will, you know, and that bothers me. In order for a referendum to work, we have to be able to have access to the truth, and I don't believe we have access to the truth.
I want to hear from 2 or 3 members of the audience, then I want to move on. You up there in the 3rd row, sir. Yes, from the back. You.
I was just going back to what Tristram said. I think it's astounding that someone in the Labour Party can sit there and talk about David Cameron being unable to fix things when he had to fix the economy that you broke and fix every other problem that you guys left to deal with.
Well,
so you managed to fix the economy, and you can't even fix your own party. You lost the election, you lost your seats. You're falling apart. He's got a much better chance than you guys do.
A brief riposte.
Yeah, I do not accept this idea that the last Labour government did not fix the roof while the sun was shining. We fixed schools up and down Britain. We fixed hospitals up and down Britain. We rebuilt the public realm under the last Labour government.
You can't just spend and spend and spend.
And we were a positive reforming force in Europe, and that's where we need to be.
To put the question that was put to Ed Miliband, did you overspend?
Yes, we overspent because we did not. Because we did not leave enough headroom in the public finances to deal with a cyclical banking crisis. And so when the banking crisis hit, what we didn't have was the kind of leeway that we needed.
So you got it wrong, you're saying.
But I will not.
Sorry, you're saying you got it wrong. You're the first candidate, I think, for the Labour leadership. Somebody else has said it before, so other people have said it, but you got it wrong, is what you're saying.
What I'm saying is that we needed more leeway in our public finances to deal with the kind of crisis that hit us. But what the real issue was an over-dependence upon financial services for our tax take. So when the banking crisis hit, we didn't have the kind of resilience in our public finances to deal with the rest of the demands on public services. And I do think, but as the Labour Party goes forward, we need to deal with that and accept that, because if people are going to trust us with their family finances and trust us with the public finances again, we need a reckoning.
How can they
on that.
trust you? Your former Treasury Secretary bounced a cheque.
Right, hold on. Let's hear from some... thank you for your point. Hear from one or two other people. The man in spectacles there, I think spectacles is right for what you're wearing.
I think...
yes, you are.
You misled us throughout Tony Blair's government with the economy, and also you took us into a war, spending billions on that, which we should never have entered.
OK. And the person in the third row on the gangway here who's been waiting to get in, young man there.
I'm getting a bit depressed about this constant talk of a referendum for major constitutional change with the EU, but the Tories have not proposed in any way a referendum for a major constitutional change, which is the repeal of rights law, the Human Rights Act. It's disgusting that you're prepared to do that, and you won't give people a choice over it.
All right, and you in the second row, sir, there.
Having a choice.
OK, you in the second row there.
I agree.
I didn't vote for a creeping federalism. I voted for a common market, and neither did I vote, and I don't think the country was ever asked whether they wanted unlimited immigration into this country.
OK, and the man at the very back there, you, sir.
Nigel, you say that if we leave the EU, we'll lose the sort of clout we have in Europe, but something that no politician has actually mentioned is that a fifth of our nation's science funding comes from the EU. Without it, we'll lose a massive source of productivity.
And universities... And the woman here on the right... Hold on, Nigel. The woman here, I just want to hear some views from the audience. Yes, the lady here.
I want to put a slightly different angle on this. That, like Brian, I'm a musician, obviously not as renowned as Brian, but... one of the things that is very important with being attached to the EU or within the EU is the amount of cultural trade that goes between. There are people I know, friends of mine, who have got flute-playing jobs in European orchestras. There are European flute players that come over here.
Would that not happen if we were outside the EU? Would you not be allowed to play music in Germany?
It wouldn't be so easy because it's because of the common...
The freedom of
anyone
movement.
Can work freedom of
movement.
movement.
And the man beside you, and then we'll go on to another question. Yes.
It seems to me that the United Kingdom is in a permanent minority within the EU. There are these great power blocks and voting blocks that we are not part of. What David Cameron has said, rather like a member of a relationship that's in trouble, is unless there are changes, I want to leave now. And if the other party comes back and says there aren't going to be any changes, then we've got to leave. There is no way we can stay after that, is there?
Well, but the trouble is that Mr Cameron himself has made it perfectly clear, even before he enters those negotiations, that whatever the outcome, he's going to vote for us to stay in. And that, you need a great big stick in
Nigel,
Europe.
That doesn't
you need
matter.
a great big stick to get any concessions.
That doesn't matter, because in the end...
it does matter,
no, it doesn't, because in the end it's letting the British people... Well, hang on. You joined UKIP because you wanted a referendum.
A fair referendum.
And we're going to have a fair referendum. We're going to have a fair...
Are we?
Well, now you're starting to complain when you've got exactly what you wanted, which is a referendum.
No, Brian talked about money.
That's the point.
Brian talked about money earlier.
Whether or not... No, let me just finish, because you've spoken a lot. David Cameron is going to get a new deal.
No, he's not.
And he's going to get a new deal. But even if you don't agree with it, even if Tristram doesn't agree with it, in the end, it's the British people who will decide if they like that deal or not. We will have a debate. We haven't had that since 1974. And I think he deserves credit for giving the British people a say.
Both sides must have the same amount of money, because I was involved in Ireland, where the Irish rejected the Lisbon Treaty. They were told they got it wrong, made to vote again, and the European Commission, it's Brian's point about money, came in with EU money and massively overspent the No campaign. We need a guarantee from the Prime Minister that will not be allowed to happen, and we get a proper...
I'm sorry. I think Nigel's being a coward here, because, he's got his referendum. He's got his referendum. Yeah, He has got his referendum. So he should listen to the British people. We'll have the debate and respect. Of course it's going to be fair. Let's listen to the British people. Oh, now it's not going to be fair. Now the money's got to be equal. Now we're putting in all sorts of caveats.
All he's asking
You've got your referendum.
What he's asking for is...
That's all you want. And now let's listen to the British people. Let them have their say. That's got to be the right way forward.
Let's listen to the British people, but let's inform them fairly.
Of course.
So that
That's what you have with a referendum.
I think...
Can you give...
I think it's time we listen to the question time audience.
Well, in the name of common decency, you know, can you guarantee that Cameron will not saturate us with more of this propaganda and win the case by that unfair method?
I mean, of course, you haven't got all the money you're entitled to in the House of Commons anyway. You've only got half the money you were allowed to have. You turned down. Well, you didn't turn it down, but it was turned down. Jonathan Penny, let's come back to this question that was rumbling along at the beginning when we started. Jonathan Penny.
Is it fair that UKIP got the third highest vote share, yet only got one seat?
Is it fair?
Can I answer?
Zanny.
I think it shows the problems with first-past-the-post voting. I think, no, in some ways it's not fair.
In some ways? There's no way it's...
Well,
whether
okay,
or not
listen,
you agree with Farage, there's no way that's fair. Come on, is there?
But
is that democracy?
you choose your political system because you want stable government as well as one that reflects the preferences of the voters. So the reason people give, and I'm actually in favour of voting reform, but the reason people give for first past the post is they say this gives you stable government rather than the plethora of coalitions that we see across continental Europe. I think this result suggests that actually you could do with some voting reform. And I'm interested that several of you may be open to that. The question is what kind of voting reform you have, and we can have an incredibly long, detailed, wonky discussion of what kind of PR makes sense.
No, you have a proper commission
on top, but I actually wouldn't want to get rid of the constituency-based system. I would add on to it some form of PR that enabled you to get more seats given the amount of the popular vote that you got.
Brian May.
Surely we need a proper commission established, you know, a selection of people who will, in an unbiased way, examine all the possible voting systems and come up with a recommendation. And I think David Cameron at least owes us that. I mean, we've had a dismissal from a couple of members of the Conservative Party, and I think that's a disgrace. I mean, how can it be democratic to just blindly support the system which supports you? There has never been a major party in power who would take apart the first past the post system because it won't benefit them. That's not democracy.
Everybody who's in the House of Commons is there because of first past the post.
Yeah, so why would they change it?
And what's your answer to that? They won't.
I think we need... Well, my dream was that we would have a parliament that was more evenly distributed, and therefore we would get a parliament acting like it was meant to, where things would be debated on an honest basis, and on the basis of the decision they came to, the law would be adjusted in that way.
You, sir, on the gangway there.
I think I'd like to make two very short points, if I may. We need to sort of bear in mind that first past the post does a really good job of keeping out some of the lunatic parties. At the last general election... we would have had...
Sorry, name names.
Well, the last general election, we would have had several BNP MPs, for example. I may be wrong, sorry, Nigel, but my belief is that. And secondly, my point is just, if UKIP can have a bit of a backbench rebellion with one MP, should we not be glad of the first-past-the-post system in that system?
OK, all right. No, hold on now. You've spoken a lot.
I would reject that.
Jeremy Hunt. Are you in favour? I mean, just remind the viewers of the figures. UKIP has one MP for 3,881,099 votes. The Tories have one MP for 34,000.
Yeah, and the question was, is that fair? And the answer is it's not fair, and no voting system anywhere is totally fair. But when you have elections, you're trying to do two things. First of all, you're trying to get a representative parliament, and secondly, you're trying to have a stable, accountable government. And the Conservatives got a majority this time, so of course you'd expect me to stand up for the system. We actually have suffered under this system as well. In 2005, Labour actually got a lower share of the vote than we got last week, and they got a majority of 66, and we have a majority of 12, which is going to make it a pretty tough parliament for the whips. And I think, you know, the advantage of this system is that what you have is one party with a manifesto for which they're accountable. The British people know what David Cameron was standing for election for. It's written in the manifesto. What we had in the last election were manifestos that were torn up, politicians doing deals, then something called the Coalition Agreement, which no one had ever heard of before the election, which had bits from both manifestos. And, you know, the Lib Dems...
you were against the coalition, were you? I didn't know
no, I'm against coalitions.
Were you against that coalition? Did Cameron make a mistake? Is that what you're saying?
No, I think in the circumstances it was the best thing to do. But I am against permanent coalition government because I don't think governments are accountable. And if you look at, you know, the biggest single casualty of the last election, it was the Lib Dems because of Nick Clegg's promise on tuition fees.
But what do you say to 4 million UKIP voters and 1 million Green voters who have 2 MPs in the House of Commons?
Well, I say that, you know...
What's your offer to them? Apart from vote Conservative?
You know, this is a system which... Well, I think, actually, this is a system where we have a two-party system because that holds the big parties' feet to the fire to be accountable for their promises. And my worry is, if you go... And I'm actually quite surprised that... Because this PR system is what they have in Europe, Nigel, and I didn't think you normally support European things.
But isn't that interesting you say that? Because every single government in Germany since 1945 has been a coalition government, and I would argue Germany probably has been rather better run than Britain's been. So the arguments against coalition are absolute, complete nonsense. This is not just unfair, what has happened here, it's an outrage. There are millions of people out there who feel completely disenfranchised by this general election. And we don't need to spend time, Brian, on a commission. All the work was done. When Tony Blair was talking about how to modernise and change Britain, he appointed Roy Jenkins, you know, former Chancellor of the Exchequer, former European Commissioner. So I didn't always agree with him. He did all the work. And the one agreement was that there is a benefit to knowing there is a man or woman that represents Uxbridge. Absolutely. But what he recommended was a second ballot paper, as they have in Germany, where for the last 20% of seats, you can express an opinion. And by doing that, nobody anywhere in Britain could say to themselves, my vote is a wasted vote. Because right at the moment, if you're a socialist living in Esher with a monster Tory majority, and it's a rainy Thursday evening, where's the incentive to go and vote? So not only are your arguments about coalition wrong, not only is it right to say that this is unfair, but actually by changing this system, we'll get a lot more young people, and people of all ages, actually engaged and caring about politics. It'll be a positive thing.
There's one thing you...
Very positive thing.
There was one thing that was designed to give redress to small parties, which is the so-called short money.
Yes.
And because of the number of people who voted for UKIP, you're entitled to £650,000, I think. Do you think you should accept that?
Well, I think what we've got to do is we've got to try and find a way of getting those 4 million people involved. Now,
should you accept the money that's there?
Hang on. The Labour Party will take several £million a year, and there'll be no conversation. We've had an open debate in UKIP over this short money, and do you know something? The last thing the public want to see is a political party infighting over public money. And I'm going to recommend we don't take any of it. I'm going to recommend we privately fundraise and set up a structure where we can give those 4 million people a chance to actually get their voices heard.
Can I just...
Hold on a second. So you will take none of the money that's on offer to UKIP?
My recommendation, given we've had an argument over this, I do not want UKIP to look like the other parties, grubbing around after public money. My recommendation is going to be we take none of it and we fund it ourselves.
All right. Tristram Hunt.
Well, I think in a democracy, if you go into the election under a certain set of rules, you have to accept the outcome of that. And the way our democracy has sustained itself over the years is by all parties agreeing to that.
But the system can never be changed.
No, but the system is not fair. No, the system has to change, I think. But whatever system is, everyone has to accept it going into the election. The constituency link is important. It's valuable. I feel, you know, very proud to represent Stoke-on-Trent Central, and having that connection there, I'd hate to see lost. The reason why so many European governments have had PR was that after the war, they consciously didn't want strong centralised administrations, either with histories of fascism or communism. So actually, you want to diffuse that. The story of Britain is different. But, as I said earlier, you know, our post-war history of Tories, Labour thrashing it out have gone. We now live in a much more diverse political landscape. And if we are going to get people engaged and interested and active about politics, then I do think we have to be open to a conversation of reform whilst retaining the best elements of the British political tradition, which, let's be clear, has served us well for centuries, and we'd be mad to let that go.
Brian Mays, anxious to get in, and then I'll come up to you, and to you up there.
It's actually worse than anyone said. It's actually 25% of the electorate that the Conservative Party was elected on. 75% of the British public are not represented in Parliament. I'm going to propose something which may sound naive. Instead of first past the post, if you had first and second past the post, you would get a hugely greater number of people who had some kind of representation in the House of Parliament. I think they should move to a new building and we should have 2 MPs for each constituency.
Well, then you must be on the commission. The woman there, in the third row from the back.
I think that, personally, as a young person who's apparently disaffected, that...
Apparently disaffected, or
apparently, yeah. That electoral reform in this country is definitely needed. And as the gentleman said down there about the fact that it's good because... Our system is good because it discounts smaller parties who might have extreme views. Personally, I think that if people vote for them and they want them to represent them, I don't agree personally, but that should be the case.
They should be allowed in. All right, and the man up there at the second row from the back.
Yes, I'm wondering where the people who want electoral reform now were when we had the referendum only 3 or 4 years ago.
Yes. Which was lost.
Yes is the answer to that. Yes is the answer to that.
They were defeated by propaganda.
You go on. You voted for it, did you?
Yes.
Yeah. And you?
I was going to say, what's the point in having a stable government to be accountable for a manifesto that most of the population don't agree with? So that's an argument for electoral reform.
OK, and you, sir, in the second row. Just here. Where's our microphones floating? There we are. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, no, it's true, because with the AV vote in 2011, not enough people were educated on the fact that what the system was and what it could provide. They had their chance. It was voted no. So should electoral reform be considered again?
But
it was an incredible sleight of hand. AV wasn't a proportional system. It was a preferential system. We couldn't explain it in a sentence to people in the referendum why Nick Clegg, after 40 years of the Lib Dems campaigning for PR, sold out for AV. I will simply never, ever know.
Jeremy Hunt, we've got 5 years assuming a Conservative government. Do you anticipate any attempt to look at the business of the imbalance of popular vote against MPs, or as far as you're concerned, is it a dead issue?
Well, I think we've always got to be alert to how society is changing. I actually do agree with Tristram. I think this election felt different to previous elections. Maybe it was the leaders' debate with 7 parties, but it did feel different, and I think you've always...
It looked different. 4 million UKIP voters and 1 million Green voters.
But if you remember, we had in 1983, I think the SDP alliance got 25% of the vote and only 4% of the seats. So, we've actually had this distortion in the system, but the other thing people don't want is governments that aren't held to account for their promises. And I actually think that we should be, think hard about what we really want, because do we want a system where all governments are coalitions based not on manifestos that have been analysed in the media, debated in the run-up to an election, but actually based on a deal that's done by politicians after the polls have closed? And that's the difference. That's what you get in the European system. And, let's have a look at those systems by all means, but I think we do have that clear accountability for promises, and I think that is something the British people value.
It's out of date. It's out of date.
Well, we could have had a Conservative UKIP coalition by now if the result had been a bit different, couldn't we? But I think we'd better stop on that note, because our time's up.
I think we had.
Leave you to ruminate. Our hour's up, I'm afraid. We're going to be in Derby next week. Week after that, we're in Aberdeen. So if you want to be in either Derby or Aberdeen, there on the screen is the address, the website address, and you can call us on 0330 123 9988. If you're listening to this on 5 Live, Radio 5 Live, you can, of course, continue to listen to the debate in Question Time, Extra Time. But here, my thanks to our panel, to all of you who came to Uxbridge to take part. Until next Thursday from Question Time, good night.
Well, we hear about shy Tories and have a debate about rejection with Piers Morgan next on BBC One in This Week.